What follows is a celestial phenomenon that is attracting attention worldwide. It concerns ongoing sightings of luminous star-like phenomenon, too large and bright to be confused with a known celestial body, while exhibiting changes in size, location, color, and magnitude, as well as duration. These attributes rule out the possibility of near-Earth objects, asteroids, comets, and supernovas as potential sources. Beginning in January 2009, sightings have been reported from Norway, Costa Rica, the United States, Ukraine, Japan, scores of countries to date. There are many newspaper and TV reports.
UFO sightings may be the stuff of films and TV shows, but they keep turning up.
Edivaldo, noites de domingo e objeto voador não identificado chamou a atenção de moradores do conjunto universitário.
Cuando hay una luz muy grande, muy resplandeciente, que no es normal verla en el cielo.
Norwegian authorities are investigating strange lights seen in the Arctic sky. The spiraling white light was seen for several minutes Wednesday morning. Locals say the light appeared to be bigger than the moon. Thousands of Norwegians bombarded the Meteorological Institute to ask what that light could have possibly been. Some feared it could have been a meteor, others a black hole, and there are even those that thought it could be aliens.
Crop circles start coming every April, and we stick the pins in the map exactly where the crop circles are and put numbers on the pins, so it seemed almost impossible that that could be the work of, you know, a few humans going out and smashing the plants down with pieces of wood. It just seemed far too sophisticated, far too perfect.
The most important question for crop circle research is whether there is a real phenomenon, meaning something not made by the hand of man. And we've come to the conclusion that yes, this is clearly a real phenomenon, and it can be proven. There is a whole range of indicators and hard evidence that satisfies even the most stringent scientific standards.
We started testing crop circles all over the world. By now, I would guess that at least 350, maybe if I haven't counted them, maybe it's 400, that we have sampled in 8 different countries, 8 or 9 now, including Australia, Israel, Canada, the United States, Germany, the Netherlands.
We can prove that there is apparently a rotational force. This rotational force contains an energy component that works like a microwave. We can reproduce many of the changes which take place in the plants and soils by means of microwave radiation.
The microwaves heating the moisture inside turns to steam, and as it does so, it has to escape. Well, if the plants are young and pliable, the outer fibers are pliable, the steam escapes by stretching the nodes. That's how you get the elongated nodes. If the energy is extremely intense, and or if the crop is old and the fibers are tough, Then it can't get out by stretching it because the fibers won't stretch, or it's just too much energy. Then it blows a hole right out at the node.
If we see it as a simple circle, the extent of the damage to the plants decreases as you go from the center to the edge. And that's exciting because we can, in principle, deliver the proof that we're dealing with electromagnetic radiation here. The so-called Beer-Lambert principle, the effect of electromagnetic radiation on matter.
What we've discovered now in formation after formation all over the world are these tiny little rounded particles, but the fact that they're perfectly spherical indicates they were in a molten state, because that's how you get the spheres. Right. And furthermore, we not only find them, we find them deposited in very unusual ways. Sometimes they're deposited at the edges of the circle only. Sometimes they're deposited very definitely in the middle. And even more interestingly, sometimes there's a linear deposition, meaning that you'll have perhaps the least at the center, a little bit more 5 feet out, a little bit more 10 feet out, until you get the greatest amount at the edge, but in a clear linear progression.
We have also found changes in the soils which we have analyzed. In the soil of the crop circle, there is a distinctly higher concentration of magnetic material compared to the control samples. And this material can also be shown to be distributed centrifugally from the center outwards. Additionally, we have analyzed the crystalline structures of the aluminium oxide minerals in various crop circles. It's well known that they expand under certain natural circumstances, and limiting ourselves only to the surface soil of the crop circles, we have found these crystalline structures changed in such a way that we could normally only explain it as a result of extremely high pressure. But you can rule this out because this type of pressure on the plants can't be proven. They weren't damaged, and the temperatures that these plants would have had to have been exposed to would be so high that sustained exposure would have incinerated the field.
The place is Switzerland. The time, early spring, 1978.
An unusual team of people makes its way to a secret rendezvous. Their goal, a tiny mountain village named Schmidt-Rutti.
They were brought here by Wendell Stevens, retired Air Force colonel and for over 20 years one of the world's leading UFO investigators. Their mission, to check out one of the most remarkable UFO cases ever reported. One that has been called alternately too good to be true, the hoax of the century, or the start of a new age for humankind.
What makes the case so special in your mind? Why bring us all the way up here from Arizona?
Man, up to now we've been dealing with just the tip of the iceberg. There's a mountain of evidence here. There's other witnesses, there's lots of photographs, there's recorded sounds, there's landing tracks, a lot of things in this case. Bigger than any case I ever saw before.
Thus begins what was to become a 5-year investigation. His name is Edward Meyer. He is called Billy, an old nickname that sprang from his fondness for heroes of the American West. He is a farmer. He claims he has been in contact with beings from another world. He also claims to have proof of these contacts.
How did it happen? What made you go outside into the forest?
I got something like a very nice voice in my head. I heard something to leave the house, to go out and to take a photo camera with me. When I was far upsides from the village, I heard a singing noise in the sky. And when I was looking up there, I have seen a disc. Then, slowly, it came lower and lower and set it down between the white trees and the forest there behind.
Meyer later photographs the impressions left by the disc's tripod landing gear. The grass has been pressed and swirled in a counterclockwise direction. Even a year later, the grass has not sprung back, but Meyer notes that the impressions swarm with insect life.
Then I have seen a person who came out of the disc.
Person came out?
Yeah. And when the person came out of the left side of the trees there, I have seen that it is a woman.
Mr. Meyer, what did they look like?
She looks like a human from this earth. Like you, like I, like human beings from this earth.
Where did they come from, Mr. Meyer?
They shall be coming from the star picture of the Pleiades.
The Pleiades, a bright star cluster some 500 light-years from Earth. Although the cluster consists of hundreds of stars, 7 stand out clearly to the naked eye. The Greeks call them the nymphs of heaven. We call them the 7 sisters.
Billy, how many sightings have you had here?
On this place I had one...
Meyer takes the investigators to over a dozen sites, describing the craft, which he calls beam ships. With a film camera on a tripod, Meyer can shoot stills with his 35mm camera at the same time.
And then I can start to film.
So we want to thank you for all your time and trouble.
Yeah. Okay, just a moment, wait.
Okay.
I have here something. Here.
What's this?
Metal samples.
Metal samples?
Yeah.
Where did you get these?
I got it from Symbiose, and she brought them from ERA.
Are they extraterrestrial?
Alright, so those are some clips that I gathered together in order to kind of preface talk about UFOs and flying saucers, and which is something I've been wanting to get into more, but of course there's just so many topics to cover. I find myself just jumping around constantly. But it is something I touched upon to an extent in Ethereal, but not in any great depth, especially in regards to the specific matter of UFOs and flying saucers and everything. But speaking of Ethereal, I did want to just kind of briefly just explain kind of what happened with that. A couple days ago, I didn't even get a notification, which is kind of weird. But suddenly I actually just kind of went to check I was trying to find a clip that I had used in there, and I went and it was blocked. And apparently PBS decided to block an entire 2-hour video because of a 30-second clip that was taken from some documentary, probably like 20-year-old documentary on the Temple of David and such. So I ended up just using the YouTube editor to take out, 30 or 40 seconds towards the end of the film, and it wouldn't let me save over the original because it had too many views, apparently. So I was able to resave it as a new video, which I did, and in a way it was kind of a blessing in disguise, I suppose, for some. I was actually kind of surprised by how many people who have been watching my stuff for the last however many months and apparently hadn't even seen it before, because I put it up in August of last year, and it was just about to kind of breach the 1 million views mark. It was somewhere around 950,000, and it gets blocked in the United States. It's still up. I didn't get a strike on it, but it was just blocked in the US, where obviously a lot of people are watching from. So no, it's basically the same thing. And on a related note, to kind of coincide with the re-upload or whatever, I did want to announce that I'm going to be hopefully getting the transcript finally put up, probably on the blog. And I had a good sister help me with that, Autumn, she actually shared her story in one of the first Flat Earth testimonies, and she volunteered to help me with a few of the chapters that I was just dragging my feet on sitting down and doing the transcription with. So thanks to her efforts, I should have that put together, and probably I'm going to try and figure out how to put that in a PDF form so that people can download it or whatever, and I'll let you know when that's ready. So anyways, UFOs. The first clip that I showed there was something that I thought was extremely interesting, especially to anyone in the flat Earth who is familiar with the issue of stars through the P900, and I admit a lot of those shots almost look indistinguishable from images of just regular stars through a P900. and perhaps that's what even a few of them are, but as you can see, many of them are different weird shapes and things that are clearly not stars. But hopefully you can see the correlation that I think is a very telling one when we start talking about the idea of the luminaries and the connection between the angelic realm and the astral realm, or the stars, and this whole sort of realization that the flat earth perspective opens us up to. And so when we're talking about UFOs, it does involve this question, this debate of, are they just lights in the sky? Are they just orbs? Or is there actual physical craft? And so I did want to kind of explore both of those aspects, or both of those ideas. But hopefully you could see from the segments that I chose that sort of a constant running theme here is this one of electromagnetism. And in videos in the past I've talked about this description that I think is a perfect description when it comes to the luminaries of the stars. Since we now know that they are absolutely not giant fusion centers of gas, millions and billions of light years away, we don't really know what they are or how they work, but we can describe them as sonoluminescent electromagnetic manifestations. Or I guess we could call them SEMs, S-E-M. I mean, it's as good of a description as any in terms of what we actually can see and observe. And from a biblical perspective, of course, it makes much more sense, all the correlations in the scripture between the stars and the angels, that when we talk about these electromagnetic manifestations, that these are somehow connected to angelic entities. These angels that God created to perform a multitude of tasks throughout creation, which is a difficult concept for a lot of Christians to absorb. But when you actually open Scripture, and even when you look in the book of Revelation, and you have angels connected to the winds, and you have angels connected to all these different aspects of creation, it doesn't mean that they are usurping the place of God, but they have jobs, they have duties, they have assignments. And that connects to this idea of powers and principalities, all these these levels of angels, these rankings that presumably correlates to different levels of tasks within creation. And we don't understand how that all works in any detail, but we just have a general idea. So then once we carry this over to the issue of the fallen angels, to the demonic realm, it follows quite logically that they possess all sorts of knowledge that they were originally given in order to perform their tasks in the creation, including things like, however, this electromagnetic nature of the heavens and the luminaries and all this really is. We can barely wrap our heads around it, and yet this is something that we're coming to understand more and more in enclosed cosmology. There's obviously a very central role that electromagnetism plays within creation. And so when it comes to things that are just orbs or lights in the sky that's all they are, is electromagnetic manifestations in the visible light spectrum, suddenly it's not it's not much of a leap. I would hopefully that doesn't need a lot of explanation. And then when you carry it over into things like crop circles, which I know a lot of people just write off as complete hoaxes, and indeed some of them have been hoaxes, but as that clip shows, there's a vast majority of them that when you really get into a deeper examination, you start to realize that they're actually caused by some sort of microwave spiraling vortex phenomenon, some sort of toroidal phenomenon that essentially uses an electromagnetic manifestation in the form of microwaves to heat up the moisture that is inside the stalks, the reeds there, and then they expand and burst and bend. And essentially what you have then is that someone or something is using controlled bursts of electromagnetic energy to essentially draw pictures in the fields. And hopefully it shouldn't really take a lot of convincing to see that the content of these pictures is chock full of New Age symbolism and occult symbolism. Probably 99%, if not all, are images, icons, mandalas, all connected to the ancient mystery schools and everything else. And it begs the question as to why, even if it were hoaxes, why are the people, because obviously they're being made by intelligent beings, whether they're human or not, why is it always about this New Age occult symbols and New Age messages in these crop circles? Personally, I believe that they are really being caused by these same ethereal entities, these same demonic spirits. And then that last clip where it was in the 60s or 70s in Switzerland, and the guy's talking about how he hears a voice in his head, and he goes out to his field and he sees a saucer, and he's got these photos that admittedly, they look pretty hokey. You can tell it's real because it looks so fake, right? No, I'm just kidding. Even here, there's a lot of the same telltale signs. He even mentions when they're leaving that the name of the being that he talked to, its name was Semjaza, which I'm sure many of you will recognize as one of the fallen angels as recorded in the Book of Enoch. So kind of a curious name for an alien, when you say. But again, when it comes to this idea of flying saucers and flying craft and things like anti-gravity propulsion systems, and which I'm sure most of you have looked into all these things, it really comes back to the same sort of unifying theme of electromagnetism, right? So in essence, what the conclusion is that electromagnetism is actually not something that is just limited to the physical realm, which is kind of what materialistic science, because it doesn't believe in a spiritual realm, assumes, and what Christianity has sort of inadvertently accepted. So the idea that electricity and electromagnetism is something that is part and parcel to the spiritual realm is something that has been completely lost on us for at least 100 years, if not longer. We just think of it as this purely mechanical force of nature, thanks to the scientific revolution, which I definitely believe is just part of the plan, right? Because you're reducing it via scientific materialism to something. By doing that, by reducing electromagnetism, something that is just seen as this mechanical element of nature and not something that can be manipulated by spiritual beings and spiritual entities, it just opens up the door for so many different forms of deception. And so if we open ourselves back up to that possibility or that realization, things like anti-gravity drives or things that somehow work off of forces of electromagnetism that are tapping into the quote-unquote, the electromagnetic fields of the earth or whatever, presumably. So basically what starts to become apparent is that in a very similar manner to how mystics and occultists over the centuries use a variety of different practices to open themselves up, open their own bodies to quote-unquote energies, whether they call it kundalini or they call it chi or they call it vril or whatever else, this idea of this cosmic energy, in order to give themselves power, in order to seek enlightenment, etc., when in reality that energy is demonic energy, posing itself as some impersonal force or cosmic consciousness or whatever. It's the same concept here, except ostensibly the idea of some sort of mechanical vehicle or shell that is being powered by the same energy, quote unquote. The same electromagnetic forces that are believed to be a part of just the natural world, when in reality the power source could really be demonic entities themselves. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the book by Eric von Daniken, Chariots of the Gods, which is almost ironically sort of a perfect description of a chariot, where you have the vehicle being driven by a living animal, right? A living beast as the power source. And so somebody can ride in it and direct it where to go. You have a harness and you have some sort of interface with with the power source, with the animal driving the chariot. And really, I think this makes a lot of sense in terms of there's theories that sort of talk about UFOs being something that go way back into history, into the Vedas and all that, and so that there's something that has been around for a very long time. This idea of these chariots. People connect it to Ezekiel and the wheels within wheels. I don't personally really make that connection myself from Ezekiel. I don't think he's talking about UFOs. But perhaps the concept or the technology that is being represented in Ezekiel is essentially the same idea. The spirits that are within the wheels and causing them to go back and forth to and fro. Satan never had an original idea in his life. So I kind of look at it more as whatever angelic thing that Ezekiel saw in his vision, presumably Satan had enough of an understanding of it to then use that and incorporate that in this deception. And whenever I think about this idea, I think about this quote that I heard a researcher named Jim Wilhelmsen talk about many years ago on a podcast. And he was talking about this vision or this dream he had where God showed him a UFO, and he could walk up and touch it, and it was like switching back and forth between being this hard metallic structure and this living organism with veins and everything, that was like pulsating and alive. And so it was like switching back and forth, like it's alive but it's metal, it's alive but it's metal. And for whatever reason, I was kind of struck in my spirit when I heard that, like there's something to that. That's, it just kind of jumped out at me, but I didn't really know what to make of it at the time. Just like that was really weird but interesting, and moved on. So years later, coming into the flat Earth research, connections to electromagnetism and the luminaries and the angels and all this, now it makes just kind of perfect sense. And it does sadden me that, like so many others, Jim Wilhelmsen, has just completely rejected flat Earth and in biblical cosmology, when he'd be one of the perfect people to help explain these kinds of phenomenon to so many people who are just brand new to these topics and brand new to all this stuff. And I just don't, L.A. Marzulli being another one where, for years and years you've been talking about how UFOs and aliens are not from another planet. They are interdimensional beings. They are demonic. And Flat Earth just completely upholds that on a whole new level, and yet they want to cling to the globe and cling to space for whatever reason. Even though, it should be patently obvious that in order to sell the lie that these things are not demonic beings from right here, but they are, aliens from some other planet or some other solar system, you need to get people to believe in a solar system. I mean, that to me, that was one of the most, it was just instantly obvious, like how that all connected. And so many people in the flat Earth, the vast majority, I'd say, once they kind of turn that corner and they realize that there's something to this, that NASA's really faking all this stuff and there's no curvature and so on. The UFO deception across the board is something that almost everyone understands on a certain level, at least in terms of all the Hollywood propaganda being pushed, how it's being pushed in the movies and the media since at least the 1950s, and science fiction, and NASA's obsessed with finding life on other planets and everything. So they get that this is an agenda, but a lot of them still don't necessarily understand that, yes, this UFO phenomena, the abduction phenomena, that this is all demonic, right? Once you start talking about demons, a lot of people shut down and they start to, roll their eyes, and they want to try, they'll start reaching for other explanations. And, there's guys like Dave Weiss out there he's a flat earther, he believes in a creator now, and that's all great, but he's still at the same time out there talking about aliens and UFOs are entities from, a different pond, like on the infinite plane, right? So we don't have other planets, we have other ponds. And it's just, so you've just kind of translated the same old narrative, the same old narrative into this new flat earth paradigm. And it's kind of sad because there's so much research that has been done from guys like Chris White, Ancient Aliens Debunked, and Canary Cry Radio for years, GONS. There's so many, and like I said, L.A. Marzulli, and so many of these guys that have been just putting out so much evidence to explain how these manifestations are real, but they are all part of this demonic agenda. They're all absolutely connected to the occult. It's all connected to the New World Order agenda. And once you understand that it's the same entities that have been perpetuating the UN and the Federal Reserve and, the one world government, and then all the aspects of scientism like transhumanism and pushing towards the singularity, trying to take this quantum leap in consciousness and blah, 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 that it's all one agenda. It's all part of one lie, and it's all being pushed by the same source, and it's not a human source. It is a spiritual source. It is from the other side. And so the whole alien narrative is a ruse, is a guise in order to get people to engage with these entities in a way where they don't recognize them as demonic entities. It's that simple, and it's just like so many other things, whether regarding them as ascended masters or whatever. And it's interchangeable. So going back to the saucers and electromagnetism, it really makes it quite easy to comprehend how it's very possible that there could be, secret facilities like Area 51 or other, deep underground military bases or whatever, where they actually have quote unquote alien craft, physical metallic craft that they found wherever, whenever, whether it was Roswell or anything since then, and technologies that they've been trying to reverse engineer for years, and then these black budget projects, which in reality would ultimately only be pointing them to trying to tap into these same forces, the same vril energy that was what the Nazis were messing around with, and then of course the Russians and the US and who knows how many different governments and stuff, to where it's a Trojan horse once again. A Trojan horse tactic for getting people who don't believe in a spiritual realm, or at least don't believe in what the Bible outlines as to how the spiritual realm works, into fooling with things and meddling with things without understanding what's really behind it, what this energy really is, who these entities really are, and what the message that they're ultimately preaching is, and why it's all a deception. Because that's the whole point of all of these deceptions, of the Copernican cosmology, of aliens, of all the rest, is really not about control in the stereotypical totalitarian sense, or just about stealing money through NASA or through movies or through whatever. It really is about indoctrinating people into the New Age message, into the New Age spirituality, into occultism, into all the stuff that is absolutely rampant throughout Flat Earth, throughout the Truth Movement, throughout, just mainstream society now. This stuff is mainstream. And obviously, alien propaganda has been a huge part of that, even if there was no quote-unquote disclosure moment, although I admit I do expect there to be one in some way or some form. And who knows if that's actually really going to involve, the whole cliche line about flying saucers landing on the White House lawn. I mean, it's possible, but it could also, the more that we see the propaganda, the alien propaganda blending with, this quantum mysticism stuff and blending with the AI stuff, I mean, it's crazy how much the lines between these sorts of things are all blurring more and more. Just yesterday, I was noticing that there's some new shows coming out, some new movies. Netflix is doing a reboot, a remake of the Lost in Space TV show, but I think it's a movie. And so it's this family, and they go get marooned on a planet or whatever, and they sort of reinvented the robot guy who used to say "Danger, Will Robinson." So in this remake, he's an alien that the boy finds, but he's also like a robot who's indwelt by this sort of astral energy, right, in the face. So is it an alien? Is it an AI? Is it, it's kind of somewhere in between, right? It's a disembodied energy, right? It's a transcendent ethereal entity who then needs this robot suit in order to interact, right? So, what a crazy example of how the narratives are really all just kind of blurring together more and more. And then this is crazy. Sam Worthington, a movie called The Titan. And like I've been talking about, the whole idea of transhumanism and space travel being interwoven. Well, the premise of the movie is that Earth is dying, and so humanity has to go recolonize somewhere else, and they decide on Titan, the moon of Jupiter named Titan. And so they start giving him all these injections and stuff, presumably with alien DNA or whatever it kind of looks like, and he starts to morph and have all these problems, and then they decide he's a threat and kill him. But he's transhuman now. He becomes the Titan. I mean, what a crazy total throwback to the whole Nephilim. I mean, it's just Nephilim propaganda. It's like the most blatant Nephilim propaganda I've probably ever seen. You got alien, transhumanism, mythology, space travel. It's like everything. And so, but this is the whole point of talking about all this stuff, because it really is just all this. There's nothing new about any of these concepts, about any of these teachings. They just repackage them again and again and again and again. And that's all Satan ever does, right? He does have certain amount of power. He's a real entity. The fallen angels are real entities. They do have certain amounts of power, but what they use this energy for is to deceive people and to get them to invite them in, right? So as much as we talk about electromagnetism and admittedly, it can get a little bit disconcerting when we think about electromagnetism and electricity being things that can be manipulated by the spiritual realm and by the enemy. When we think about how that is just intruding into every little inch of our lives through the technology that we use, and everyone knows about 5G and these things, and that whole thing coming up, and being bombarded with EM waves, just on a frightening level. And how is that going to possibly tie into some sort of mind control or great deception or or, just the idea of getting zapped with radiation and cancer and things like this. So there's a lot of fear-mongering and, that can come with that. And that is not the message that I am trying to get across here. The good news is that once you understand that all this stuff has this common demonic core, this common satanic source, is that Christ has authority over that entire realm. And that when you put your faith in Jesus and when you become born again through faith in Christ and the Holy Spirit comes to live within you, just like Ephesians 6:12 says, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers, against the principalities, the forces of this world in heavenly places. And we have the ability to bring down strongholds and to rebuke the enemy and cast out the enemy. And we do not have to be afraid of these beings. But we have to understand the lies that they are telling, the lies that they have been telling to the entire world for generations upon generations. But speaking of Ephesians 6:12, I actually talked to Lloyd from the channel Ephesians 6:12, and he's back up again with a new one because his main channel and he had a backup channel, and they were both taken down, and just more of the censorship. But I did get a chance to talk to him earlier this week, and that was a real encouragement to me, and so I'll leave a link down to his new channel as well. He made a comment about how we were talking about UFOs, and he said the heavenly angels, God's angels, they don't play peekaboo. And I was like, I thought that was a great quote, because it's that's what you see all these manifestations, all these little things do. It's just these little games of peekaboo and what is it, and it gets people gets people curious, it gets people hooked in. It's the whole mystery school, it's just the same old mystery school tactic of like titillating people's curiosity and trying to give them a trail of breadcrumbs. And that's not how God works, right? God doesn't use his angels, he doesn't use transcendent experiences and spiritual experiences to just pull you down rabbit holes, right? Because once you get sucked into that mentality, you're following the breadcrumbs deeper into deception, into new age lies, into the idea that you can become God, the idea that you can harness this energy for yourself, that you can become enlightened, that you can become like one of these ascended masters. And that's what they've been telling people for generations upon generations, that you can be like them, that they're here to teach you, they're here to help us evolve. I mean, it's literally like the oldest trick in the book, because it goes all the way back to the garden. It goes all the way back to Genesis 3. If you eat it, you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. And it's just an absolute lie from the pit of hell. So, as always, Jesus is the only answer. Jesus is the way. Look to him, look to his word, and you will be grounded on the rock. Thanks for watching.